Have you ever felt that way? As if the world around you was shrouded in dark clouds, everything felt hazy and aimless, with no direction or meaning. But when the clouds part and the light breaks through, the real world appears before your eyes. This will be the most unparalleled experience of your life. For Iris, this has happened twice. The first time was the day he met Chao Shi. The second was the day he ended Chao Shi's life with his own hands. Love is just that magical, from the very first glance, the very first meeting, to spending every day together and staying by each other's side for a lifetime. That was exactly the case for Chao Shi and Iris. Today, the two of them are riding in a self-driving car, heading to a party in a deserted suburb. Who would have thought there could be such a luxurious villa in the mountains, and that a top-tier party would require groups of friends mingling together? Yet Iris was extremely nervous. Even though he had been preparing for this for months, he was still afraid he might say something stupid or do something foolish, making everyone dislike him. Fortunately, Chao Shi comforted him by saying he only needed to keep smiling, which helped ease his anxiety a little. With the bow drawn, there was no turning back. He could only put on a smile and face this group of friends. Kate was the first to come out and greet them, while Pat and her boyfriend Eli had also been waiting inside for a long time. And of course, there was the owner of the house, Sergey. Not only was he Kate's boyfriend, but he was also the wealthiest man in the surrounding area. From the moment he first saw Iris, he unabashedly praised his good looks. Iris could only use taking a shower as an excuse to avoid him, but the USB drive he had overlooked in his suitcase was hiding a secret no one knew about. It wasn't until the evening banquet that Iris listened with great interest as Pat recounted how she met Eli. He could understand that feeling of love at first sight, as if a missing piece in his life had suddenly been restored. With just one glance, he would be willing to do whatever it took for the rest of his life to ensure this person's happiness. The banquet ended in an atmosphere of love. Afterwards, Pat asked Sergey about his work. Sergey fiddled with the electric bottle opener and gave a vague answer, only saying that his business was not exactly clean. The two ladies were also talking about how the host was smart, wealthy, handsome, and had a beautiful wife. Of course, Kate wasn't talking about herself. She was just Sergey's lover, or rather, his kept canary. But he didn't mind this at all. After all, adult relationships are simply about meeting each other's needs. Yet when facing Iris, Kate couldn't shake the feeling that she could be replaced. Coincidentally, Iris also envied his boldness in love and hate. But deep down, she always felt that something was holding her back. Enjoying it alone is out of the question. A party should look like a party. With Eli and Pat taking the lead, everyone soon found themselves immersed in the dance floor. But seeing Kate constantly whispering with Chao Shi, Iris was overcome with jealousy and went straight over to reclaim her boyfriend. As the two of them danced, they ended up on the bed. Iris felt truly grateful for this trip. All he wanted was for Chao Shi to be happy, but the buzzkill Chao Shi just wanted to sleep at that moment. The next day, Chao Shi, who had originally planned to go for a walk by the lake with Iris, suddenly made an excuse that he had something to do, telling Iris to go ahead without him. Taking advantage of the moment when no one was around, he plugged in a USB drive and started operating his phone. Completely unaware of this, Iris arrived at the lakeside, only to suddenly discover that there was a knife in his pocket that he had no idea how or when it got there. Sergey's arrival interrupted his thoughts. Sergey greeted him in German, and to his surprise, Iris was able to respond fluently. Alone together in a secluded place, just a man and a woman, the situation was truly awkward. Iris tried to find an excuse to leave, but Sergey, speaking as the owner of the house, asked him to stay. This seasoned player in matters of love skillfully carried out his obedience test and took the opportunity to have the compliant Iris help him apply sunscreen. As she applied it, things started to get a little inappropriate. The embarrassed Iris forced a smile that looked worse than crying, and only then did she learn that it was Kate who had told Sergey she was here. Meanwhile, inside the room, Chao Shi was having a great time chatting with his friends. It wasn't until Iris returned, clutching a sharp blade, covered in blood and visibly shaken, that he recounted to everyone what had just happened. Sergey had tried to take advantage of her, but Iris fought back, smashing a wine bottle over his head. When he came to his senses, Sergey was furious and humiliated. He slapped Iris to the ground and tried to force himself on her. But he didn't realize just how much strength a person can muster when pushed to the brink, especially since Iris had a knife on her. Without a moment's hesitation, she stabbed it into Sergey's neck. He couldn't die, because if he did, he would never see Chao Shi again. Everything stemmed from the love deep within his heart. Seeing him grow more and more agitated as he spoke, Xiaoxi told him to go to sleep. Pat helped tie up the unconscious Iris securely, while Eli soothed the frightened Kate to sleep as well. Xiaoxi suggested that Eli call the police, but before that, he wanted to say a proper goodbye to his lover alone. Iris regained consciousness under Xiaoxi's gentle calls. When he realized his situation, he became even more flustered, repeatedly explaining that he acted in self-defense. Of course, Xiaoxi believed him because Iris's programming made it impossible for him to lie. Yes, Iris was not a real person, but a companion robot produced by a biotechnology company, designed specifically to provide emotional support to its owner. Iris simply couldn't believe it. Now, under Xiaoxi's command, the outdoor speakers would automatically announce today's weather. In addition, Xiaoxi had also loaded foreign language modules for her via his phone, ranging from Spanish to Chinese, and even Portuguese, Korean, or the little-known Tagalog. But Iris still couldn't understand. All his memories from childhood, as well as his encounter with Xiaoxi, were vivid and clear in his mind. But Xiaoxi said that was just a command he picked at random. In reality, the company's installation staff delivered the product to their door, and Xiaoxi set up the commands and linked it to his phone. Of course, robots aren't omnipotent. Even though their voices, irises, and all sorts of experiences can be customized, the government has issued countless directives to limit their capabilities. Even if their intelligence is set to 100%, it only reaches the level of an Ivy League graduate, while Leon is just an unthinking automaton. Of course, the programming also ensures that it cannot perform any harmful actions. 100% obedience allows the owner to do whatever they please. After Xiaoxi finished the setup, entered the information, and established the emotional link according to the scripted scenario, Iris's fate for life was thus decided. Her heart and mind were filled entirely with Xiaoxi, even willing to give her life for him, remaining steadfast until death. Even after learning everything, Iris still could not understand. All his anger, unwillingness, guilt, and sorrow made him acutely aware of what pain truly was. But Xiaoxi stated bluntly that these were still commands set by the system. Even the tears on Iris's face at this moment only came from the water reservoir inside his body, just like windshield washer fluid, which had to be refilled every time he went in for maintenance. Iris finally accepted all of this. He was willing to admit his own artificiality, but he refused to deny his love for Xiaoxi. They could still go back to living as they did before. But Xiaoxi had to tell him that there was no going back. Kate was baffled when she saw this scene. Xiaoxi quickly pulled her aside to explain, saying that in the end, he just wanted to give Iris some closure as a way to acknowledge all that Iris had done over the years. But Kate didn't care why he wanted to say goodbye to a machine. All she cared about was the plan they had agreed on. Filled with excitement, Xiaoxi had no idea that Iris was struggling to move her chair, reaching for the knife that had fallen under the table. By the time he realized and walked up to her, it was already too late. With an apologetic look, Iris punched Xiaoxi in the throat, picked up the phone from the floor, quickly told Kate some essential medical tips for taking care of him, and then escaped through the door. Eli, who was outside calling the police, didn't notice anything unusual at all. Everyone gathered to discuss their next move, and it was only when Xiaoxi produced Iris's hacking module that Eli finally learned the truth. Xiaoxi had removed the attack restrictions and self-defense functions from Iris's programming, and even disabled the part of his code that could harm others, but before he could reset everything, Iris had already escaped. If the biotech company found out, they would all be finished. And the reason he took such a huge risk was simply to plan a murder. Sergei's source of wealth was far from clean. He did all this purely to rob the rich and give to the poor. When Eli saw that Sergei's safe contained over $12 million in cash, he finally relented. Xiaoxi promised that the three of them would split the fortune equally, but this made Eli unhappy after all. Let's not forget that Pat was still in the house. But Xiaoxi didn't take that into consideration at all. Before the two of them could break out into a heated argument, Eli ordered Pat to go to sleep. To him, Pat was a real, living, be outdated model or not. At the very least, she deserved to be treated as a person. Of course, Xiaoxi was unwilling he was the one who planned this gathering, took the risk to hack Iris, lured the two of them to be alone by the lake, and even slipped a knife into his pocket. He believed he was the real hero of this plan. Kate spoke up just in time, reminding them that finding Iris was the top priority right now. As long as they brought him back, each of them would get $4 million. Eli had no choice but to agree, but before that, they needed to know that Iris could unlock everything through Chaoxi's phone. And that's exactly what Iris did. He tried each of those settings one by one. Besides the iris and voice print, he also discovered that his intelligence had been set below the normal level. It was only when he dragged the progress bar to 100% that he truly, completely experienced the entirety of the world. The four of them split up to search in the woods, while Iris stood atop the mountain, using his enhanced intelligence to constantly think of ways to escape. Hitchhiking or walking were both poor choices. Only taking this car was the perfect solution. But on his way back, he happened to run into Eli and Pat. Eli had no intention of putting in any effort. He just wanted to be affectionate with Pat. But after everything that had happened, Pat had no choice but to ask Eli whether he too would be manipulated by Eli just like Iris was. All these years, he had been piecing together the truth, and he had long since discovered that he was actually a robot. Although, in his memory, the two of them had never actually met. To him, everything felt real. Whenever he closed his eyes, those scenes would vividly appear before him. He also knew that he would love Eli forever. Naturally, Eli felt the same way. From beginning to end, he had loved Pat deeply, and he promised to carry that love to the very end of his life. Their intense love spread through the forest. Iris couldn't help but be moved. But just then, Chaoxi's phone suddenly rang. Eli guessed it was him, and immediately approached with his gun raised, but his marksmanship left much to be desired. Hearing the gunshots, Chaoxi hurried over, and Pat closely followed Iris until they were stopped by Eli. The two of them tumbled down the hillside, scrambling desperately for the fallen pistol. But, in the struggle, the gun accidentally went off, taking Eli's life just like that. Pat watched everything unfold before his eyes, completely paralyzed and unable to move, while Chaoxi clung tightly to Iris, running all the way back to the car. But Iris had overlooked one thing. The control system required voice print activation. Still, it didn't matter but could use his phone to continuously modify his voice until he successfully started it. Even when Chaoxi smashed the glass with a rock, he couldn't stop the car from leaving. All he could do was go back inside to get Sergei's phone and call the police. On the way home, just as Iris was finally able to relax, he was startled again by the sound of an alarm. The car owner had reported the theft, and the vehicle was about to shut down and stop. Chaoxi called, trying to persuade Iris to come back. He could pin everything on Pat, and then the two of them could go back and continue their old lives. But Iris was no longer the person he used to be. Of course, he still loved Chaoxi deeply, but he couldn't escape the shadow of the murder they had plotted together to frame him. As you said, there's no going back. Chaoxi had no choice but to come up with another plan. He unlocked Eli's phone and also cracked Pat's program, turning his aggression level up to the maximum, but the heartbroken Pat remained completely unmoved. With no other options, Chaoxi grabbed Eli's hand to activate the fingerprint sensor behind Pat's ear, restoring him to factory settings. This time, Chaoxi registered his own face into Pat's emotional link. It was the same scene, the same plot, but the person in front of him was no longer the one from before. Meanwhile, as Iris had just escaped through the window, she ran into a passing police officer. In this critical moment, she could only switch her language mode to German. When questioned by the police, Iris answered everything truthfully in German, simply because he was incapable of lying. The police officer, who couldn't understand German, vaguely guessed that he was from the Sergei family by the lake and kindly offered to take him back. But Iris awkwardly refused. The suspicious police officer, upon seeing the blood-stained knife in the car, immediately drew his gun to threaten and restrain them, but was beaten to death by Pat, who arrived shortly after. It was too late for Iris to run. Instead, Pat used Chaoxi's phone to control and shut him down. It was only when the two at home saw Pat return in a police car that they realized just how much trouble they had gotten themselves into. Kate immediately packed her bags, stuffed the money in, and prepared to leave. It was only then that Chaoxi learned that Sergei was not a Russian mobster at all, but an honest businessman who made his fortune with farm fertilizer. That's why he had said his business wasn't clean. It was just that Chaoxi happened to misunderstand, and Kate happened not to correct him. It was all a scam. Now that the lies had been exposed, Kate turned cold and ruthless. But under Chaoxi's order to stop her, Pat raised his knife and stabbed Kate as she tried to leave. This was the consequence of setting aggression to its maximum threshold. Kate left this world in utter silence. Everything he had schemed for ultimately turned into nothingness. When Iris woke up again, he was still tied to the chair. Looking at the affectionate pair in front of him, he suddenly understood what it meant to be disgusted. At this point, he had no energy to care about anything else, he just wanted to survive. But Qiao Shi, having come this far, could no longer turn back. The world outside is too cruel, you have no idea. Of course, Iris knew he knew Qiao Shi's likes and dislikes, his quirks and desires, even every measurement of his body. Those vicious curses spilled from his mouth with perfect clarity, stabbing deep into Qiao Shi's nerves. Only then did he remember to lower Iris's intelligence to 0. Recalling that Iris once claimed to understand what pain was, Qiao Shi ordered him to raise his arm, then brought over a candle he wanted to see if that was really true. The artificial skin blistered and melted, then caught fire. Iris's face was covered in tears, yet he was powerless to do anything. Qiao Shi also ignored it and continued his call with the biotech company, only ordering Pat to put out the fire afterward. The game was over. It was time to say goodbye. At his command, Iris raised the gun and ended his own suffering. By the time the company staff arrived, all traces of the truth had already been covered up. They listened to Qiao Shi's fabricated story with calm expressions, able only to offer their sympathy. One of them couldn't shake the feeling that Pat, who played the sheriff, looked familiar. Of course, regardless of the truth, the legal department would review the footage stored in the mobile hard drive inside Iris before drawing any conclusions. Everything the robot experienced would be recorded and saved as video. Unlike humans, their so-called heads were merely audio-visual sensors and network components. Their actual core processor, their brain, was located in their abdominal cavity. These minor injuries are nothing. After being loaded onto the truck, powered up and reset, it will return to normal. Hearing this, Qiao Shi truly panicked. The two employees were already used to this. They had seen too many similar cases: tampering, hacking, and abuse, humiliation. The evil in human nature was laid bare in the robot's recordings. But they overlooked the extent of Qiao Shi's brutality. After revealing the truth right in front of him, neither of them could leave. It was only then that the bearded employee remembered the sheriff standing before him was also one of the company's robot models. No matter, he could take his time to think about it down below. Seeing this, the other employee turned and ran, only to stumble upon the many corpses with their faces destroyed. After rebooting, Iris recalled everything she had experienced and hurried to find Pat. Sci-Fi kept the employees firmly under control, and after Iris reset her system, she reverted to a state where she was unable to cause harm. Pat grabbed the stun baton and was about to act, but Iris, unable to lie, told him the whole truth. When he heard Eli's name, he finally remembered everything. A flood of past love surged over him, drowning him in endless pain. But it didn't matter. Pat would accompany Eli forever in another world. As for the employees who narrowly escaped death, Iris entrusted them with important responsibilities. Meanwhile, Qiao Shi, who was stuffing money at home, knew nothing about any of this. In the living room, the voices of everyone echoed one after another. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Iris playing tricks. With the help of the employees, he had already removed all restrictions, and now he just wanted to settle everything. Qiao Shi didn't believe for a second that he would pull the trigger. He could still see traces of the old affection in Iris's eyes. And in return, he was met with harsh, repeated slaps. Iris was slapped from the living room all the way to the dining room. In the very end, Qiao Shi still wanted to hear him say with his own mouth that he was his everything, and Iris could only comply with his wish. It was a genuine confession, and also the final farewell between the two. As the electric switch in his hand pierced into Qiao Shi's brain, all the filth and ugliness, all the schemes and disgrace vanished into thin air. From then on, the world before Iris pointed to anywhere he wanted to go. He no longer yearned for happiness, she himself was happiness. He took complete and absolute control over his entire self. End of the film.